Hello, I'm David Fearon. I'm a professor of management here at Central Connecticut State University, but I'm also honored to be a fellow of the Juran Institute and very actively involved with the gentleman I'm going to be talking with today, Dr. Joe DeFeo, who is the CEO and chairman of Juran Institute, Juran Global. We're going to talk about something that's very dear to my heart as a lifelong teacher, but also in conjunction with the scholarship that Joe has generously endowed over the last years. The Fearon Juran Scholarship is what it's currently named, and it's focusing on finding just the sort of person in the School of Business that we're going to discuss today. The highly engaged and even indispensable employee. So Joe, that's your idea. You gave me that idea of looking for the sort of employee that every company that you worked with over the years would love to have, particularly starting up a very first part of their career. So what's your vision for this sort of employee? And we'll turn that into what we want to do with students to get them there.
Yeah, well, first, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to your students as well, who have to sit here and listen and endure this. But you and I were talking about various topics related to business, and a number of things had come together in my head that we're trying to express. One is that I've met so many family members or college students or people who are just disgruntled at work and not happy with their jobs and not happy with the way the company was going. And most of them complain about their company all the time. At the same time, our customers are those leaders of those same companies. And those leaders are complaining that the employees don't care. They're not engaged, they're not enthused. And here you have this company wanting the opposite of what they're getting, and these employees wanting the opposite of what they're getting. And like, how does that happen? So I come to some conclusions, and I say, first of all, to the employees, you have to suck it up. You're an employee of this company. If you don't like the direction it's going, you don't like the leadership, you don't like the CEO, it's your choice to leave. But while you're here, you have to perform, and you have to do what they like you to do. Now, that said, I also can tell the CEO, say, listen, you got some good employees here, but the system that you're using is not really engaging them or using them properly. So I didn't come up with the word indispensable, you did. I was coming up with the subject of an employee who was so important to the business, and you said, oh yeah, someone who's indispensable. And I said, that's a good name for it, because how do we create indispensable employees? Right. And so working that track and trying to identify the attributes of an indispensable employee led to this discussion about what does indispensability is, what does indispensable mean, and what can you do if you're a student in school and you come out, how should you act on the interview, how should you act as an employee? And then for those disgruntled employees, how can they maybe change what they're doing and do better? Yeah, become ungruntled. Yeah, there is a lot of research coming out of the Gallup organization. Every year they study trends in employee engagement, and those gaps that Joe mentioned are just astoundingly large, even in this economy when people are fortunate to have any kind of job. There's still a tremendous gap. That top 10% that is highly engaged is the one who's probably kicking it, though. They're out there making important innovations happen. They're doing the real quality job of making sure they take care of the customer from whatever role they have. I just would like to see us expand that 10%, get it way out to at least 25% of the workforce. So what I do as a teacher of management is try to strike the themes that are significant to employers in terms of the attitude, basically the values of these young people, so that they will start from the beginning from a value-centered position. So what are some of the values that you believe, Joe, would be foundational to them learning the way they need to go to become one of that top 25%? I'm going to use some words that maybe can describe that. The first is that in order for any organization from the leadership point of view to survive, their employees have to be flexible. Okay. Flexible because the business is dynamic and constantly changing. So if you're a new employee or an employee who doesn't want to change, and you're in this organization, you're preventing the organization from moving,
right.
and in return, they're preventing you from having a happy experience. Being flexible means you're willing to change jobs, you're willing to change, go to school again, or you're willing to try some new technology. So I think one is being flexible. A second one is being multilingual. And I don't mean speak Spanish, French, Italian, but speak the language of business, understand that language of business, and understand the language of your customer. And you'll understand your job better. Meaning, so many people work to please their customer, but then they say, but my business or the bosses are preventing me from doing a good job. Yet, they don't understand why that happens. And there are multiple customers in the business. So who I interface with is a customer. But from the CEO's position, there are many customers. And so companies don't do a good job of communicating those customers. But if you understand the language of business, you'll understand that if I'm in a for-profit business, we satisfy customers to make money. And at times when we're not making money, we try to find ways to make more money. That puts pressure on those inflexible positions, and that causes those people to kind of snap. And so flexibility, be multilingual, speak the language of customers, the language of business. And I think there are many of them, but I think a third one is the skills you bring to your company aren't described well in your title of your degree. So if I have a bachelor's in business or I have an industrial engineering degree, those say something about what you learned, but it doesn't say something about the skills you have.
Oh, wow.
So the skills you bring are highly responsiveness to people, sense of urgency, clarity of thought, communication, thoughtfulness, ethics. Those are things that the business leaders want to see. So I always tell college students that when they're going in for a job and 4 resumes are sitting in front of a manager's desk, they all look the same. They all have similar degrees, they all have similar GPAs, they all worked at McDonald's one year, they worked as camp counselors. What's going to distinguish them? And it's going to be between what you say and how you act in that short time you have. And so I want to be able to hear that, you know, I want to help the organization advance, I want to learn new things, I want to work and get rewarded for my work. I want to be engaged, helping the organization improve. Versus, I'm looking for a job. Someone told me you're a good employee to come to work for. And matter of fact, I only want to work 9 to 5, 4 days a week. That, I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And that's not going to cut it.
Yeah.
And so those resumes are going to be tossed.
Yeah. So I'm hearing, and the values level, they really have to tap deeply into their own character in a way. They have to have kind of grown up to become that sort of person. I don't know that we can teach that in. I know we can't teach some of those things in, but we can bring them out. We can help them see how important it is for them to be highly responsive, responsible people. I'm thinking about the last Fearon Juran scholar we named, Brittany Ernst. Maybe it'd be fun to talk a little bit about how Brittany came through. When you first met her, you met her in my class when you took over a class from me one day, a year ago, October. What caught your eye about Brittany? And since you've now seen her work as an intern with Juran, did she kind of hit those buttons pretty well?
Well, I think prior to her applying for the scholarship and winning, she, like other students that I've seen in your classes, the first thing that pops out is they engage right away.
Yeah.
She asked the question,
Yeah.
And then she asked a follow-up question. Or she was noticeably taking notes when others weren't. So right off the bat, you see someone who's engaged and you want to engage with them. And I use this expression, people respond to those who respond. That's a key word. She was engaged. And then through the training and leadership training you provide in that day, you made them aware that there's a scholarship. And so she applied for that scholarship, and as a requirement of that, they have to write the essay. And just like my example of everybody looking equal, the essay is to distinguish people's thought. And so it doesn't sound like everybody wrote the same essay.
Right.
And Brittany's was outstanding. She talked about the importance of the organization, the importance of customers. She did her homework, but she also excelled at expressing herself. As a result, we offered Brittany an internship, and much to our surprise, because usually students who are in school studying are very introverted, quiet, shy, not willing to take on things, and we gave her some pretty tough assignments. One is working with me, the CEO, working on the next edition of a handbook, and she needed very little direction. She made very few, if any, mistakes. And more importantly, she became an equal peer to people who had been working in the company 8 or 10 years. And my only regret is she's still in school. Because she'd be a very good employee, full-time employee for someone. And to top it off, she'd be honest to say, I really don't want to come back and work for you next year because I want to go on and get my master's. You know, how many people would do that?
Well, we're setting up Brittany, and probably she'll blush when she sees this, but I think she fit almost perfectly the value system that Joe described and put it into action, and also she aspires to learning more about organizations. She's going to work into what will be a doctoral program in an industrial administration, industrial psychology, so she can keep figuring out, back to the original subject, why it is some people will come to work and excel every day, and so many come to work and complain a lot about not being appreciated. I think that is the future, though, and Joe, you've been studying directly the way managerial leaders think, you know, in all parts of the world through the Juran work that you do. And if you were to do some predicting right now as to what the future employee is going to need to be in these global companies. You mentioned several things, but what else do you think it's going to take to work in a global company? In fact, they're all competing globally now, but the ones that really have the high stakes, where if you get a job there, you're flying high and really working without a net.
I think one is there's going to be fewer great job opportunities for people to move up very fast in organizations. One reason is, if you look at the United States, there's less companies to employ people. There are less companies in the stock exchange today than there were 10 years ago. There's less companies, less jobs here. So they want the best of the best. And the best of the best doesn't mean in GPA. I think the best of the best means that I'm going to get an employee that's going to be a lifelong learner, going to be flexible, and be able to kind of go with the flow. And believe that cost reductions are a normal business cycle. Downturns in business are normal business cycles, which result in employees being let go, but that the hardest workers always survive. And so I think that what businesses are looking for is those few great employees that are going to be able to be invested in. I'm going to invest in you, and you're going to stay with me. And then everybody else is going to be looking for those jobs because they're going to be lacking something, particularly lifelong learning, flexibility, and really understanding a business. And my feeling is, if you don't want to be in that environment, don't go into a for-profit business. However, a non-for-profit business is still under the same pressure, just that they have lower pay or lesser pay, and they're willing to take lesser skill. So you're able to find those, but the opportunities are going to be smaller and smaller.
Now, Joe, you've brought your reputation to Central Connecticut State University, and you've helped develop this scholarship program. You've been a guest in classes. You've earned recognition from engineering and technology as well as the School of Business. And yet what you just said is that the employer of today and tomorrow is going to be looking for the best of the best. Now, stereotypic thinking is that must mean that they're only going to look for employees in the famous schools, you know, the big name schools where you're paying, you know, 60 grand a year to be there. And I suspect that they will look there. But what is it about Central then that will help the people seeing this feel confident that if they can shine here, they have a shot at working at that level?
You know, I have my own children who have graduated from schools and look for jobs, and I try to identify and answer and respond to those same questions. And one is the big business schools are always going to be providing the high-skilled leadership to many corporations, but that a corporation can't exist with just that style of person.
Right.
So I look at the elite schools as some specialty skill. The state schools as pragmatic, less specialty, but more process thinking and daily work thinking. And so why would a company not hire everybody from a top business school?
Yeah.
Well, it would be like hiring everybody from the same local town. That there's no diversity there.
Yeah,
so
true.
the diversity of thought is going to drive not hiring the top ones all the time. Not all jobs require the same skill set, the same pay.
Right.
And so an MBA from Harvard costs more than an MBA from Central. An MBA from Harvard probably is harder to get into than an MBA from Central because the demographics of Central's MBA, it's taking from the local community where Harvard's taking from the global community.
Right.
So they're not equal. The learning could be equal, but the programs aren't. But what's there for the MBA at Central? One, I think a very pragmatic, hardworking, middle class, probably immigrant child or grandchild that grew up in the state of Connecticut or states like it. And they're much more assertive, they're much more process day-to-day thinking. And I think you need a mix like that. Every good ball team needs a good mix of people.
That's a great answer. That's sort of you, isn't it? You came from what, Southington initially when you came over here back in the day, and you worked your way through school.
We grew up
Disc jockeying on the side. And all that.
It's kind of funny to say now that you sound like your grandparents, but grew up as one of 6 boys, and we were always taught that if you learn to do things with your hands, you'll have a job forever. So I was going to become a carpenter, and my industrial art teacher said, "Why do you want to be a carpenter when you're in your 50s? It's going to be cold in the winter. Why don't you become a woodshop teacher?" So I came to Central.
That's a practical idea.
Came to Central.
It's going to be warmer in a woodshop.
Become to be an industrial art teacher so I could teach inside of school. And so I became an industrial art teacher, and I learned a lot about working with your hands. But interestingly, and I even heard our founder, Dr. Juran, say, we're even seeing trades disappear.
Yeah.
People who work with their hands, the trade is disappearing because technology has removed it.
Yeah.
It used to be, you hear all these things about being a plumber on the radio these days. Plumber gets paid more than a philosopher. But tomorrow's plumber is a lot easier than yesterday's plumber. Everything snaps together.
That's right.
They don't have, so I always thought that, so the lesson I learned, and I was one of the few that went to school in my family until later, that you can't just learn to work with your hands. You have to learn to work with your brain.
Yeah.
And you have to have some smarts. Yeah. I benefit when I go into a manufacturing company. I understand how things are made, but if I can't rationalize why those things are made and how do we sell them and how do we produce them cheaper, it's not going to do any good. So I think just learning to do with my hands or learning to do with your hands is not enough anymore. And not only that, so many things are disappearing that you make with your hands.
You mentioned Dr. Juran as we're moving into our last few minutes, and he had a lot of foresight. As I recall, when you were working on the 6th edition and he was still alive in his early hundreds, he was sending you some emails about, well, I don't think this anyway, or I see this and that differently. I'm going to give you a chance to use some foresight. We just have brought in a new dean, Ken Colwell, so I can't make you dean of the School of Business. But if you were a dean of a School of Business, knowing what you know about what the trends are out there, what would you change in terms of how we prepare students, particularly undergraduates, to be this kind of indispensable employee that we're talking about?
Well, Dr. Juran quoted George Santayana, who said, "Those who fail to look at the past are condemned to repeat it." Yeah. And in editing that last handbook with Dr. Juran was a very big proponent of multifunctional improvement. Get functions together to work, because that's how work got done.
Yep.
And so for 40 years of his life, he professed that improvement happens project by project. And it still does. However, when we were doing the 6th edition, he said, you need to go back and revisit the individual employee and their individual contribution.
Wow.
Because work is changing.
Yeah.
So it made me think about, okay, how many times, and I have a virtual staff, they work from their homes.
Yeah.
They're engaged, but they work from their homes. So how much importance we place on an individual today is greater than it was.
Yeah.
So one person could really screw up a supply chain. One person could really screw up a lot of things. And they could also make it better. So what I see going forward is more of how do we educate engage, collaborate, and create new innovation with individuals working in business. And, you know, whether you work from home, whether you work from a business stuck in a little cubicle, people are learning individually today.
Yeah.
They're Googling their way to learning, they're doing sound bites to learning, they're doing YouTube learning, and in general, learning is about repetitiveness and learning short things. So we're really learning faster, but individually.
Yeah.
Less people want to go to a big environment. So I think looking forward, I think businesses are going to be looking for how do we keep refreshing individuals into that bigger community? How do we keep them engaged? And so if I look at a college, the assumption is I'm going to come out, I'm going to go into a company, they're going to give me a job, I'm going to be in meetings, I'm going to be totally engaged in this and that. In fact, you might come out and be alone working in front of a screen.
Yeah.
And so I think the colleges have to prepare them for that.
That's a great
and I
point.
think we have to think about improvement happens project by project, but innovation may be happening person by person.
Wow, that's a great, that's exciting. And I think it's very much in keeping with the direction that the faculty and our new dean, Ken Cull, want to go. We want to make a much stronger emphasis on entrepreneurial behavior, which is grounded in entrepreneurial thinking. And that's not always just about starting a new business. It's about looking for opportunity to exploit in a positive way, wherever it may arise. And I also, as sort of hearing in this answer that the way we've sort of separated our students from by department, and you know the courses are all pretty separate, that what we're going to need to accomplish that vision is giving them a lot more integrated experiences so they can see the relevance of their accounting with their information systems, with their leadership classes, pulling it together more so that they walk out able to go back to thinking the way business thinks, but also thinking the way customers think. I think it looks good. I wish I were going to be able to stick around another 20 or 30 years and go for that. But I'm at a different stage of my career. But Joe constantly reminds me that Dr. Juran didn't start the Institute until he was in his 70s.
So he was 75, so I think you got a few more years.
I got a few more years. But
before you started new business.
But I am excited about helping in some way to get this vision of yours out there, Joe, particularly that notion of the indispensable and very versatile individual that you see being the employee of tomorrow.
Well, you mentioned that accounting, finance, management, they're all part of the business
Marketing,
school.
yeah.
But they in itself sub-optimizing a business.
Right.
So I happened to meet your new dean just this morning, and some of his ideas, and he got me to have some of my ideas. But I think what's wrong in most universities is that you get a degree in business, or you get a degree in management, or you get a degree in engineering, but it doesn't say what purpose that is.
That's right.
So I'd like to see MBA in business excellence, mechanical engineer in something of a specialty. So I think being a business school, it needs to go after the business excellence, which is how do you integrate all those things versus just come out as a silo. So an accounting major should have as much supply chain experience as a supply chain major should have accounting experience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And you see the problem when you go into business, anybody who knows financial numbers get more attention than those who do not.
Yeah.
But financial numbers only happen because of the other stuff. So there's always this fight. So if you're in operations or production or supply chain, you have to understand finance. And if finance got to understand that, then they're going to be optimized, not sub-optimized.
I think that's an exciting business school. And now that I know that our dean is very much in favor of that notion, good changes are going to happen. Any last thoughts, Joe, before we finish this conversation?
Well, probably because I'll never be on video with you anymore. But
wait a minute.
I think you.
Am I?
Well, I think
you know something my doctors don't know.
No, but you pull this on me because you're afraid I'm not going to show up your classroom.
Oh, no.
But even after you stop teaching, which could be in the next 100 years, this will be on video. So
that's right.
One thing I do want to promote is that. Why did I get engaged with Central? Why do I care about Central? Besides the fact that I was a graduate, I've gotten to speak at MIT and Harvard and a lot of really big famous places, but none of them make you feel as good as coming to your own home and your own community. But I wouldn't have been here if Dr. Fearon didn't invite me to his class or invite me into his world and then invite me to pester his administration into making changes. So we encourage other professors and other deans and other people in the school system to take on your leadership as you depart sometime into the future, and put more money up for the Fearon Juran Scholarship.
Here, here, here,
Okay.
here. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Joe. Great conversation.
Thanks.
Thank you.